Hey everyone, it's Miss Appleby here. Today we're going to be learning about Sig Figs and what that word means in science. In science, we use lots of numbers. And as you go through my class this year, you're going to see that we use numbers often to calculate data. You're going to inplug those into data tables, measure weights of objects on a scale, identifying different temperatures of different substances, hot or cold, and much more. And so once we get all of these numbers, we have to calculate them in a certain way with science in order to be considered accurate and precise. And we'll learn a little bit more about what those words accurate and precise mean later. However, if you've ever plugged numbers into a calculator and come up with a bunch of numbers with decimal points and exponents included, that can be a little bit scary. And so today we're going to learn which numbers we need to write down in a calculation without having to write out 10 to 15 digits at a time, because that can be really time consuming even when using a calculator. So if you look right here, you can see that when I plugged in this calculation, I came up with a number that's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 digits with an exponent. And that can just be really overwhelming as a student trying to develop some different mathematical equations. So stick with me here, get a pen and paper, and we're going to take some notes on how to write down this number in a much simpler way while still being accurate and precise. Here we go. So sig figs are considered significant numbers. And if you've heard the word significant before, maybe you've heard it in the term significant other, a significant piece of information. It essentially means important. And so significant figures are important numbers that we use in science. And so please, on your notes right now, take a moment to write down the following rules. First and foremost, non-zero digits are called sig figs, meaning any number that is not a zero will always be considered a sig fig or significant. Number two, sandwiched zeros are sig figs, meaning if a zero lands in between two numbers that are not zero, we are going to consider that zero significant and important. And finally, number three, a final zero or trailing zeros in the decimal portion of a number are considered significant. So, examples of this: all the underlined numbers here are going to be considered significant figures. So in the number 134, based off of rule number 1, telling us all non-zero digits are sig figs, we've got 1, 2, 3 sig figs in the number 134. Going down to this second number, 104, as you can see, all three of them are underlined because we have two numbers that aren't zeros, meaning they're significant, as well as a sandwiched zero here. So all three of these are considered significant figures. Next example, we have the number 104.00. So if you get this number 104.00 in your calculator, we're going to see we have two digits that are not zeros, so we know those are going to count in accordance with rule number 1. This sandwiched zero is going to count in accordance with rule number 2. And lastly, these zeros that follow after the decimal point are going to be considered significant as well, and those are following rule number 3. Going down to our last one here, we've got two zeros, 0.340, so this is 0.34. And I only have the 3, the 4, and the 0 underlined here, meaning in this 5-digit number, only 3 of the digits are considered significant or important. And that's because these two zeros come before the decimal. And so my 3 rules here say nothing about zeros that come before decimals, meaning they are not significant. And we are only looking at the numbers here that follow that decimal point. So we've got 3 sig figs in our last example. All right, now we're going to go into doing some calculations with our significant figures, adding and subtracting. So looking at the following, go ahead and pause this video and take some notes on what you see here. Okay, I'm going to continue, so hopefully you have paused your video and taken notes. Now, significant figures and calculation rules. When you notice that you are adding or subtracting numbers together, you have to keep the following rules in mind, and they are different than multiplying and dividing. So in our previous example, we were just looking at a number and deciding how many significant figures there were. Now we're going to add together some numbers that have decimal points, and we're going to round our final answer based off of these rules. So when you're adding or subtracting, your final answer is going to be rounded to match the number in the original problem who has the least amount of numbers to the right of the decimal. In this example, 53.34 has 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures in it, all being non-zero numbers. Plus, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 significant digits in the second number. And so even though both of these numbers have 4 significant figures, notice that my answer ends up with 5. Well, if I plug those two numbers into my calculator, this is what my calculator is automatically going to give me, 287.64. Well, based off of my rules with adding and subtracting, I know that I'm going to have to round this number, but I have to be careful of the way that I do that. So the rules tell me that I need to look at match the number in the original problem who has the least amount of numbers to the right of the decimal. Well, in my original example, I have 2 numbers past the decimal in 53.4, and I have 1 number past the decimal in 234.3. So 2 numbers is bigger than 1, meaning I'm going to go off of this number to round my answer finally down to 287.6. Next, we're going to go into multiplying and dividing. In multiplying and dividing, we're going to use some different rules here. So you still need to be able to calculate and figure out how many numbers are significant in each. Then you're going to round your answer to the original number that has the least amount of significant figures total. For example, I have the number 3.34 being multiplied by the number 234.3. The number 3.34 has 3 significant digits in it, the 3, the 3, and the 4. The number 234.3 has 4 significant digits in it, the 2, the 3, the 4, and the final 3. So when I get to my answer, this is what my calculator is going to give me, this 6-digit long number, and I'm going to need to clean it up based on the amount of numbers that are significant in the smallest number here. So 3.34 has 3 significant figures, which is smaller than 4 significant figures. So I'm going to round my answer to only 3 significant figures total. Well, 782.562 is going to round up to 783. We round up because of the 5 is going to bring the 2 up to the 3 here. You should have learned that in your math class. And that's how we're going to round based off of multiplying and dividing for Sig Figs. Let's go into some examples.